with the recording. And now we are going to start our August WEAll talk. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. For those who are joining us for the first time, WEAll talks are meant to have a safe space where we can discuss topics in a deeper way, and we can share. It's an interactive event. It's not a webinar. We are lucky to have three incredible women who are going to be sharing about community wealth building in the wake of COVID. So Sarah McKinley, Julie McLachlan, I'm always afraid of pronouncing the last name, forgive me, and Sarah Deas. We are so grateful for having you here. So just a few tiny little things on how this is going to work. I just want to make sure that everybody's going to be mute while they're talking and they're presenting the topic. But then it's going to be an open mic. I'm going to try to keep track of whoever wants to participate, to share. And I want everybody to have the opportunity to do it after they're presenting their topic. But while they're talking, if you want to share any ideas or questions on the chat, I'm going to keep attention on that as well to make sure that they're responding to your questions. What else? Am I forgetting anything? Sarah, Julie, no? Well, I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, but I want to say again that WEAll is very grateful for having you as members of WEAll and part of WEAll, and for having you today leading on this WEAll talk. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. And absolutely delighted to see so much interest in today's event. Very excited. I was, when you first suggested a WEAll talk on community wealth building, I thought it was a great idea. And as some of you be aware, I wear two hats. I'm both a trustee of WEAll in Scotland and also chair of North Ayrshire's expert advisory group on community wealth building. So I just see this model as a really powerful approach to local economic development. And it's gaining traction across the whole of the UK. And here in Scotland, North Ayrshire is pioneering the way. And we're going to be sharing with you a wonderful case study. So I'm going to kick off just setting the context. It's important that we all understand what we mean by community wealth building. So I'll share a definition. And then in the usual WEAll talk manner, we'll open up with a question to get you all involved. And then I'm going to pass to the other Sarah, who's going to set the context in terms of this discussion in the world of COVID-19, and Julie, who's going to share the case study from North Ayrshire. And then we'll open up for a full discussion. So what do we mean by community wealth building? Well, it's a progressive approach that seeks to use the economic levers available to anchor institutions to support their local economies. And by anchor institutions, we mean organisations like local authorities, that's councils, the health organisations, health boards, the further and higher education institutions, and companies, particularly large companies. And it's through using, can you hear me? No, sorry, I thought it was an interruption there. Through using their powers in terms of procurement budgets, their employment practices, their assets, property and land, they seek out ways in which to keep wealth local. So to limit how wealth is extracted from the local economy and ensure that it's broadly held with the income recirculating in the local economy. That's the main focus. And from a WEAll perspective, it's really a bottom-up approach to systems change. So very, very relevant to our whole agenda. So the question that I want to pose to us is, what have you been doing during the COVID crisis that could pre-configure community wealth building? So in other words, be the first stage in community wealth building. And to draw an example from North Ayrshire, the community support hubs are hubs that are being created. There's 6 in different localities across North Ayrshire, and they're a point of contact for the community to address their needs related to COVID-19. So the coordination team is based in these hubs, and they're there to respond to phone calls from the community and provide advice, signposting and referrals. And their principal aim is very much aligned to the community wellbeing goal of inclusion and wellbeing. And clearly, as we look and hopefully come out of this current crisis, the legacy from these hubs is that the collaboration on which they're centered will hopefully lead to possibly food cooperatives or food collaboration, because that's been a strong theme that they've been addressing. So these are the type of ideas that are now being explored and the seed of the possibility that's been created. So let's open up the floor for other ideas or observations of what you've been doing in your own areas.
You can open your mics. I think I have only mute only a few of you, so you will be able to do it, or raise your hand and I'll unmute you if you're having any issues. But please share. Jackie, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Great intro. I wanted to share with you, actually, I'm putting in a research proposal to the UKRI for the citizen science, but we're pulling together these different communities. But the one that I'm most deeply involved with is a series of rural communities that really got left behind in COVID, mainly because they don't have transport. So even though people were locked in, they didn't have access to any kind of public transport. Literally, it just died. But what's happened out of this is exciting, because a lot of young people who can't afford cars and feel marooned out in these sort of small farm dwellings and so on and so forth, are coming together under the Low Carbon Warwickshire banner. And they're going to combine the idea of revitalizing transport for hubs. They have a community hub as well, for EV. So they're going to try and go literally one big step and not just ask for public transport, but to actually go for a whole infrastructure around charging stations and buses and so forth. So it's really exciting. And I think what they're stressing is this intergenerational process, because whilst it's being driven by a group of young people, they see that through the COVID, a lot of elderly people were left behind and were very, very isolated. So I think that's perhaps quite a good example. And they have this phrase, which is also in the Forest of Dean, which is called, oh gosh, what's it called? It's got a really catchy phrase. It's called Cafe, oh my God. Well, Act on Energy is what they're calling themselves. And then they have this, can-do cafes, they call them, the can-do cafes. So I just sort of put that into the pitch because I'm fascinated by what they're doing in Ayrshire, and I'd love to invite you after this to come and have a talk with me about whether we can include your communities in this research bid.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Anyone else who would like to share? If I'm missing any hands, please unmute yourselves and.
Hi. Sorry.
There you go. Yeah, Parvati, go.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Hi, Sarah. So nice to see you. I haven't seen you since a year.
I know, lovely to see you on the call.
I have something that's been happening, and I'm currently in India, and I can give you a little bit of a global south perspective of how inclusion has been activated in a time of absolute crisis in India, because the country went into lockdown with hardly a 24-hour notice, and almost 40% of Indian economy is employed in the informal sector. So these are daily wage laborers, and a lot of them got stuck in various regions of the country. I did see a whole bunch of initiatives and organizations that kind of just came together to distribute essential rations, so rice and lentils and hygiene products, to all of these individuals who are stranded. They created camps for people, and apart from that, for those who are truly stranded and didn't even have houses, there were volunteers getting together, like soup kitchens abroad, cooking vast amounts of food and actually distributing it using all the social distancing guidelines. So these organizations operated for over 60 days, 90 days some, and it's still functioning, and it's very interesting and kind of, I think, speaks to the theme of community well-being being kind of taken care of.
Thank you so much for your sharing. Catherine, I think you were going to share something as well. I had the feeling. I don't know if...
Yeah, I was just going to speak about our amazing friends here in Scotland, the Linwood Community Development Trust, who for so long have been resisting an economic model imposed on them that was very corporate-led and extractive. And this group of amazing local women just said, no, we're not having this. And they mobilized and they did loads and loads of consultation. And I think what they've been doing, they probably wouldn't use the term community wealth building, but I think it is intuitively, in that they're building local businesses. They're trying to get all local firms to procure to them, really strict on living wages, and just sort of employing, working with local people. They're building a football pitch because they realize that's such an important, I guess, fulcrum of the community where people want to play. And they were talking about one of their key measures of success is when young kids came to them saying, can we have a key to our football pitch? And they just saw that as a really symbolic moment and a sign of success, that folks were feeling ownership of what they were doing. We've got a little paper on it on our website because it's just such a lovely little story that I think speaks to a lot of aspects of the wellbeing economy and very much the community wealth building agenda. I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you so much, Catherine. All right, so I don't know if anybody else would like to share more local learnings and experiences, but if not, I think I'm gonna give it back to
I'll share a neat one, Anna.
Where are you? Sorry.
It's Mike
Oh, there you
Rollins.
go, Mike. Yeah.
Hi, Mike Rollins from Vancouver, and I'm just going to pop into the link or into the chat a link to
Yes.
a local nonprofit that started up during the COVID lockdown here in Vancouver, and it was responding to the fact that a lot of the soup kitchens and free food available to folks who lived on the streets or were in need had to close during COVID, so there was no food or food service available. Meanwhile, a lot of the restaurants were also forced to close and laid off lots of their staff. So a coalition of restaurants got together to produce meals for disadvantaged folks in the harder pressed communities in the city and distribute those meals for $10, less than $10 a piece. Amazing coalition that was put together in a week or 10 days and got support from the local government to subsidize some of the food costs and the startup costs. And a number of the better restaurants in the city all got involved. It was really fast and deployed an awful lot of meals really, really quickly. A great example of supporting local.
That's really great example. Elaine? Yep. Elaine, or maybe I'm not saying your name. Elaine Cooper? Yeah. There you go.
Elaine.
We can't hear you. It's not working. Can you hear her? No, right? Okay. No, you're mute now.
Still can't hear me? No?
Now, yes.
You can? Okay, right, I'll try again. All right, sorry. So SURF is a national Scottish organisation which deals with communities across Scotland. And during lockdown, we've had about 150 examples sent to us by our network of work that's going on locally on frontline delivery services. And what your colleague there was saying about the Canadian restaurants working together with local food banks and things has been replicated in different bits of Scotland. But my point was going to be that one of the exciting things that's happened is the amount of collaboration that's happened between local authorities, businesses, health boards, all sorts of people who very often didn't really speak to each other before. And we've just sent out a survey. We're getting early responses back from about 150 organisations across Scotland. And so far, about 80% of them have said that the collaboration has been absolutely crucial to sustaining and supporting and helping local communities to be resilient and to look forward to ways of pulling out those very unusual partnerships and bringing them forward to build things back better. I think that's something that so one of the things we're doing is looking for things which have happened during lockdown, which wouldn't naturally have happened in normal circumstances and have very positive outputs. And if we can find a way of sustaining them, would help to encourage and support communities to become more resilient.
Thank you. That is impressive, Elaine. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we have reached the point, for Sarah Deas. I don't know, Sarah McKinley. I don't know whose turn is now. Sarah, yeah, your turn then. Over
all
to
right,
you.
I'll jump right in. First of all, it's wonderful to be here with these wonderful women who I get to work with, and with everyone on the call. It's wonderful to see familiar as well as new faces. So great to be here. It's nice to be part of the WEAll family. So this is wonderful. And it's wonderful to hear all that's going on already in your communities. I won't talk for that long because there's so much knowledge in this space that I want to really have this be a dialogue. But for those who don't know, I just want to quickly give a little bit of the Democracy Collaborative is a US-based think tank that's been advancing community wealth building in communities, largely in the US, for about 20 years. But we're now also working transatlantically to really exchange learnings and connections and resources on both sides of the Atlantic and ever more. So really just going back to some of the things that Sarah Deas already mentioned, but really wanting to highlight, community wealth building is a system changing approach to economic development. So it's really about building a new economic system in place from the ground up and designing that economic system in such a way that through its natural functioning, it is producing more equity, more sustainability, more resilience for those communities, not the sort of extractive means of doing economics as we have been doing for so long in our communities, extracting labor, extracting wealth, extracting assets, extracting capital from those communities. Community wealth building flips that on its head and is about really building in well-being of a community from the ground up. So it's a means of implementing well-being at the local level for communities. And the main means of doing so, as Sarah already alluded to, is the reconfiguration of our economic institutions in place. So for example, Sarah mentioned anchor institutions, hospitals, universities, city government, large place-based institutions, but also financial institutions, land ownership, community land trusts as an example, credit unions, cooperatively owned financial institutions that have at their heart community service, community to deliver a good for the community, and more importantly, are owned and controlled by residents of the community. So the concept around community wealth building is really about rebuilding, reconfiguring institutions so that they are owned and controlled by the people who benefit from them. So they really are determining their own economic futures, their own local well-being, their own abilities to thrive and live in place, and doing so through democratic means, participation, and community control. So in all of the examples that you were mentioning that are just really exciting and have bubbled up organically in this moment of crisis. So Jackie, the can-do cafes, when you think of it in a community wealth building lens, you're always going to be asking, who owns these can-do cafes? How are we ensuring that the way these can-do cafes are designed will sustain their longevity over time for the community? Could the can-do cafes perhaps become worker-owned cooperatives? Or is there a way that in fact they could be part of a network of municipally owned enterprises throughout the city providing services to people within? Could they actually be housed within land or property owned by the city or collectively owned, for example, in a community land trust? So always interrogating how these local economic actors are owned and who they're responding to, who they are accountable to. And of course, most local enterprises, for example, are there to serve the community. This is what they're doing in the first place. But how can we ensure that is sustained over the long term? So really thinking about the design of every aspect of our economy and how it's really measured. Again, as opposed to sort of a trickle down idea that there's going to be a large corporation who's going to come in and create jobs, probably shitty jobs for your community, and has no commitment to place at all, and will leave at the first possible ability to find a cheaper way of doing business in other places. So it's really an understanding that the way we've been doing things isn't working, and now how can we flip it and do it from the ground up in a ways that roots it and creates better equity, fairness, sustainability, resilience over the long term. And of course, as we've just been discussing, now in this moment of COVID, not only have we seen how much our systems has been failing us, right? The austerity, the extraction, the removing things from our community has really failed us. As again, as Jackie was saying about rural communities, there's no transport there. And that's probably because that transport at one point was privatized or you know, put out to bid by someone who, or some corporation that isn't at all connected to the community and doesn't know the needs of the people. So how can we create different transport systems that respond to the needs of the community and are rooted there? So really, this moment has shown us how our system is failing us, how it continues to fail our communities. I mean, we can't even provide appropriate health gear, PPE to our systems. I think someone's gone off mute here. Is that Philip? Oh, okay, if you don't mind muting. Great, thank you very much. And I'll wrap up pretty soon, but it is also an opportunity, because it's showing us not only how important local is, how important resilience is, how important community is, and also what real well-being is, right? Well-being is not consumption. Well-being is, I mean, you know, who's had to buy a damn thing other than food for the last 5 months? I mean, what do we think of as well-being, and how can we really define that in our communities so that we can thrive and prosper and connect? And so we're really seeing this in this moment. And so it's both a challenge, as we are really going to be, you know, hurting even more in the months to come, but an opportunity to really discover what's valuable and redirect. And frankly, now is the moment. If we don't get this right, you know, climate change is breathing down our necks. You know, this is the opportunity to really pre-configure the design of our local economies to be resilient for these coming shocks that we're due for, to really create the communities that we need. We can't go back to normal. We can't go back to austerity. We can't go back to neoliberal extraction. We have to do something different. And you already are, from all these incredible examples. And I hope you capture the chat, because these are really wonderful examples that we should be lifting up and connecting. And that's sort of the potential of community wealth building, is how do you connect all these endeavors in a really intentional, systemic, and strategic way that reshapes local economies for the common good. So that's sort of an overview of this moment and why this is really important. We need to move away from kind of projectitis, you know, a project here, an effort here. We've all had to compete for funding and all this kind of stuff. No, now we need to collaborate, as someone was saying. We're already doing it. We need to bake that into how we operate. We need to collaborate across projects and endeavors. And that's why it's so exciting to see all you here, and to hear from Julie about how they're doing that in North Ayrshire. So thank you. Look forward to the discussion.
Okay, am I on next?
Yes, Yuli.
Great. Okay, firstly, thanks very much for the invite to speak to you all today. There are some familiar faces and some new faces, which is great. I also want to say that it's a privilege to be on this panel with the two Sarahs, two people that have really supported our community wealth building journey in North Ayrshire, and some people who I have personally learned a lot from too, and I look forward to working with them both through our community wealth building expert panel. I also want to say that we don't have all of the answers in North Ayrshire. We are very much at the start of our community wealth building journey, and it's, as Sarah has mentioned, it's great to hear of all the other examples of wellbeing and community wealth building work that's underway. And I'm delighted that the Council will become the first local authority in Scotland to join the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and we're going to publicly announce that, I think, later this week. So very, very timely to be speaking to you all today. I've got some slides that I want to share, so if you bear with me for a few moments just while I fumble about here. So hopefully you can see that all okay. Yep. I'm taking a nod from Anna as a yes.
Yeah, go for it, Julie. It's great.
Great. Okay, so I just wanted to start by setting a bit of context around North Ayrshire as a region, as I know this is a global network. We're one of 32 local authorities in Scotland. We're in the southwest of Scotland. It would be fair to say that North Ayrshire hasn't benefited from traditional approaches to economic development. 1/3 of children in North Ayrshire live in poverty. We have a very low job density. There's only one job for every 2 people. And in 2019, we declared a climate emergency. So it's clear that a new approach is needed. And that's what we intend to do through community wealth building and the launch of our community wealth building strategy earlier this year. So I just wanted to set out what community wealth building means to us in North Ayrshire. As the Sarahs have mentioned, it's about using the levers available to, that's my new term, the Sarahs, using the levers available to anchor institutions to create more inclusive local economies. It's about a new economic model that's focused on inclusion and focused on well-being. It's about more local and fair employment and ensuring that wealth is locally owned and benefits the people that live in the place. And I've set out here what our community wealth building mission is, and our strategy is framed around that. The strategy was written pre-COVID, but we feel that community wealth building is absolutely appropriate in our efforts to build back, and we are committed to building back better, fairer and greener in North Ayrshire, and we'll soon set out a recovery plan or a recovery approach, which is framed around community wealth building and a local Green New Deal as well. So I've just included what the 6 key areas of focus are for our strategy. It's a really ambitious strategy. It sets out 55 actions for how we're going to change our local economy and put in place this new economic model. At the heart of that is how we work as a local authority, how we work in partnership with our businesses and with our communities. And it's about working right across the council and with our local partners, including our regional anchor institutions such as health boards, such as college, the third sector, to embed the community wealth building approach from the bottom up. It's about how we use our spend as a council to support local businesses, local social enterprises, and also ensure that we have sustainable supply chains that support our effort to achieve net zero by 2030. It's about fair employment, so not just encouraging the creation of any job, but jobs that are fair and meaningful, to offer progression opportunities and unlock the potential of the people in North Ayrshire. It's about how we use our land and assets to support the wider regeneration of our community, including through community ownership and looking at alternative uses as well, and also using our land and assets to support us create clean energy and tackle climate change. It's about financial power, so we will invest locally, and I'll give a few examples of how we've done that, but also encouraging wider regional and national institutions to invest in our communities and encouraging progressive finance initiatives as well. And lastly, it's about plural ownership. It's about ensuring that our business base is locally owned, that it benefits communities, that includes inclusive business models like cooperatives. And to help us achieve all of this, we've established a Community Wealth Building Commission in North Ayrshire, which includes our key anchor institutions, and that's about embedding these principles of community wealth building throughout their work in the region as well to benefit our local communities. So as I mentioned, there's 55 actions within our strategy. I've given a flavour of some of those here, just some of them that I want to highlight. Around local spend, we want to encourage our local business base to explore local supply chains. We think that is really key in light of COVID, and also key in light of our ambitions to achieve net zero. We're going to review how we currently use council land and assets and opportunities to use them for the common good. We're exploring the feasibility of a community bank for the west of Scotland, which would be based on a cooperative model. And we're promoting a cooperative culture in North Ayrshire as well. So what does this look like in practice? As I mentioned, we're at the start of a journey, but there are already some really good examples that we can build on in North Ayrshire. So I'd like just to highlight a few of those. One is around our Community Investment Fund, which is a 2.6 million investment fund that's allocated to our localities in North Ayrshire. And we ask our communities to come up with proposals aligned to their locality goals. And you can see one of the examples here is around a men's shed project. The second example is around Three Towns Growers, which are a community organisation who have taken ownership of land for allotments and are also carrying out some education outreach work centred around food and food provision. And the final one there is around a Food for Life project. So we worked with a social enterprise on the island of Arran in North Ayrshire to build their capacity in terms of being able to participate in local supply chains. They now supply fresh foods, organic fresh food and vegetables to the schools on Arran. So that has immediate benefits around local employment opportunities, around the productive use of land, around shorter supply chains as well. And I just wanted to end with some lessons from our journey so far, and I'll hand over to Sarah Deas. So I think at the heart of it, what has been really important for us to be able to achieve what we have in such a short space of time was setting a vision and getting buy-in to that. So this has really been driven by our council leader, Joe Cullinan, but everyone working in the council has an understanding of community wealth building and how it is their role as someone who works in the council to deliver their role in line with the principles of community wealth building. It's important to get anchors to collaborate with you, and it's important that they understand their role in supporting the local economy, but that takes a while to kind of build up that understanding of how they have this economic role and this social role in terms of delivering their services, whether it's buying goods, the buildings that they own, or the people that they employ. And working across silos is a key area. So this isn't just about how we do economic development in North Ayrshire. This is about how we operate as a council. As Sarah's mentioned, this is about a system change approach. So it cuts across all areas of what we do as a local authority, whether you're working in procurement or HR or community development or regeneration. It's important that there's bottom-up engagement, because it's not going to be me who works in economic policy that's going to deliver this strategy or this ambition. It's going to be our local communities and our local businesses and our local social enterprises that deliver this. You need to be both ambitious and bold, but also think at a practical level around what you're doing that is actually going to make a difference to communities and businesses on the ground. You need to build awareness and knowledge of community wealth building, and also show quick wins and success stories to get others involved and to build momentum and realise that there are benefits in embracing a new economic model and a new approach. And finally, as I mentioned, we don't have all of the answers. We are still on a journey, and so it's important that we get challenging feedback. And one of the key ways that we'll do that is through our Community Wealth Building Expert Advisory Panel, which Sarah Deas chairs. So I'll hand over to you, Sarah, to say a bit about the work of that panel.
Thank you very much, Julie. So the panel is principally a sounding board and a critical friend. So we're there to challenge thinking and provide advice on things like the wellbeing economy and climate change. I'll just give you a flavour of membership because you'll know some of the organisations. So the Democracy Collaborative, we've got both the other Sarah and her colleague Jo Gwynn, who are both members of the panel. There's representatives from Community Wealth, from Commonwealth, from Open Democracy, from CLES, the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, Cooperatives UK, the Scottish TUC, Community Enterprise in Scotland, and WEAll. So it's a really broad international panel, and we're aiming to come together every 2 or 3 months, but actually also to be there on a timely basis. So we've already slotted in another meeting for next week to respond to a particular discussion where our advice was being sought. And just to give you a feeling of discussions, our last agenda focused on the Anchor Charter that's just about to be created, and also plural ownership. So what we're trying to do is to not have a large agenda, but to keep ourselves focused so we can give a depth of advice and guidance to Julie and her colleagues at the council. So the feedback is that we're proving valuable. I'm looking to you there to nod to that, Julie. But as Julie said earlier on, it's early days, so we're needing to pioneer in our approach and make sure that we're currently putting the mirror up against ourselves to make sure we're adding the greatest value to this new progressive approach. So to draw together this this element of the introduction, I hope you found it really interesting and inspiring. Certainly for North Ayrshire, we see it as a game changer, having the potential to transform both the North Ayrshire economy and the wider Ayrshire economy. And now is the time for us to open up and have a discussion. We're interested in any questions you have, any observations, where you've already been pioneering what you might see as similar approaches, what we can learn from you, and also where you see this type of approach being most relevant in what type of geographies, and any challenges you think that we should be aware of. So lots of opportunity to discuss. We've got 20 minutes, so I'm going to hand back to Anna to orchestrate the discussion.
Well, let me start saying thank you to the three of you for everything that you have shared and for opening now the conversation. I just wanted to give the mic to Vicky because she's got a question for, I guess it's for Julie, right, Vicky? I'm not sure, I'm not 100% sure, but please open, yeah, there you go.
Okay, I open my mic. Yes, thank all of you for the work that you're doing. We are doing some similar work here in Trinidad with the Green Market and have a community that's about 9 years old, linking small farmers directly to consumers. And that is the basis on which we've been trying to build community wealth. But my real question is about the money. And I want to know, Julie mentioned that there was a 2 million or so, I don't know, Scottish dollars, pounds, community investment fund. And I would really like to know about the structure of that fund.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. That's a good question. So that fund was created 3 years ago now by the council at our budget setting time in March 2017. It sat alongside a range of other funding initiatives, one focused on challenge poverty, and from that we've created a new supported employment service in North Ayrshire, which is focused on helping those with health barriers, either retain employment, supporting them with their well-being and supporting them into fair employment opportunities. Alongside that, the council also committed funding to explore the feasibility of the basic income pilots in Scotland. So we launched that report in collaboration with 3 other local authorities in June this year. So I'm happy to share that report as well, because I think there are clear links to the well-being economy with basic income. At that point, we also launched the 2.6 million community investment fund, and that was building on our work on community empowerment. in North Ayrshire, they've set up 6 locality partnerships. So those locality partnerships have decided what their own priorities are for their localities. They are a collaboration of community organisations, of local businesses, of volunteers, of wider anchor institutions. And this funding was really to support them to deliver on some of their local priorities that they'd jointly identified. So as I've mentioned, it supported things like the Three Towns Growers community organisation. It supported a digital learning officer for one of our localities, and it's really a bottom-up fund to enable them to take forward their proposals. I think what's important as well is that they've actually managed to leverage in additional funding beyond the council support as well to support their ambitions.
Thank you, Julie. The real reason for this question for everybody is that when you don't have a council and you don't have a local government authority that is willing to do that seeding for a variety of reasons, then this model is difficult, because then you don't have the local government involved. Just wanted to point that out. Everybody doesn't have that advantage.
And that's very true, Vicki, and it's a big concern. I know Anna wants to redirect, but just real quick, because it is true, a lot of the examples we see is direct investment from the city. You can do creative things with a pension investment, actually. That's one way that things have been capitalized in Preston, for example. But again, if you don't have the city that you're working with, there are other ways. In Cleveland, with our evergreen cooperatives, one of the things we've done is create a fund that the cooperatives, actually all of the cooperatives, contribute a percentage of their profits into capitalizing that fund, so that they can grow that fund. That's small, and it depends on the profitability of the cooperatives, so that takes time and a lot of hard work, but there are ways to do creative financing like that. And for example, with our evergreen cooperatives in Cleveland, to begin those cooperatives, we had a huge financial stack because we didn't actually have a lot of direct investment from the city at all. So we leveraged foundations, we leveraged individual contributions, we leveraged federal government grants, all these kinds of things. So there are other creative ways of capitalizing some of these things. And I'd be happy to share more. I know you shared your email with me, so let's follow up.
Thank you, Sarah. I hope, Vicki, you got good information for that question. So Mike, I'm going to give it back. Mike Rowland, I know you have a question. There has been a few comments on the chat, but Mike, you are the next.
So my mic and video have been in and out, so I hope everybody can hear me. I just was curious, and Mark Langdon has popped a comment in there as well. Curious about how you built the political consensus at council to move forward into a strategy so boldly like this.
That's a very good question. Perhaps Sarah McKinley would want to chip in as well, given her experience of engaging with a range of local authorities on this. We learned lessons from what happens in other places, and I think I mentioned in my talk around the lessons learned, you have to be able to show success and potential success from the outset. So we drew on the work of the Preston model, which some of you might be aware of, and looked at some of the potential benefits created around that, particularly around more local procurement and spend and supply chain support, and what were the benefits in terms of businesses in that region, in terms of the employment rate, in terms of living wage and child poverty as well. So we already had a case study, if you like, to be able to say this model has worked elsewhere and could work in North Ayrshire, given the similar issues we face with things like deindustrialisation, being a community that is left behind, if you like. Beyond that, I think it was really important at the outset that we made sure there's an understanding of what it was we were speaking about here. So we did some elected member training. We did that face-to-face and virtually as well. We would give case studies of where it's worked, including the work in Cleveland. that Sarah's mentioned and the Preston model, and set out what some of our proposals were early on around what we wanted to achieve.
And that is really important to show by doing. Now, it is true that in the UK, a lot of the examples are Labour-led councils, and that's because there's been a political momentum around that, and also an ideology. And certainly there is a politics to this in the small p sense of the word. This is about, you know, creating a more democratic economy, and building empowerment by doing so. But once you show results from that, it really doesn't matter what your party politics are. You can see that this actually does, in fact, create better paying jobs, higher quality of life, you know, all of these demonstrable effects. So the more models we have of it that we can show to, the more you can talk about it. In the US, we have actually done some work with what would be considered Republican or conservative cities, Albuquerque, New Mexico, for example. But one of the things you can talk about when you're talking about community wealth building is that this is communities, you know, doing self-sustaining. They're doing this for themselves. They're not necessarily asking for handouts or government intervention necessarily. I mean, we believe that there needs to be a supportive ecosystem for this at all levels, but certainly at the local level, this is something that appeals to all people who want healthier communities. And I see, Mike, you mentioned sort of a libertarian mindset. Again, you can speak to this as sort of communities doing for themselves, and creating self-sufficiency from the ground up. And again, if you can show results from that, I think it can transcend politics as well, or big P politics.
Thank you, Sarah. So, Catherine, I'm going to pass it over to you for your question, and then Amanda, and then Vicky's got another question with the information that you provided, Julie. So please, Catherine, go ahead.
Mine was just a quick one around the role of sort of local currencies and how much they may or may not be useful in, I guess, adding to the momentum, or are they a bit of a distraction, or just, yeah, I'd just love your take, Sarah's and Julie.
Who wants to? Okay, Sarah.
I've been talking a lot. Sarah, do you want to say anything, or Julie, have a thought on this?
I have to be honest, Catherine, it's not something I've looked at in detail. I have been speaking with some of the other areas in the UK progressing community banks, and I know some of their initiatives have arisen out of local currencies, like I think the Bristol pounds. It's not something I've looked at in detail, but I'd be keen to see any research on it. As I've mentioned, you know, we are still at the very start. I guess one of the key things that we want to focus on is progressive finance initiatives like a community bank that would support local communities and businesses, but also how do we expand the roles of local credit unions as well? They play a really important role, and we're fortunate in North Ayrshire that we have a really supportive and progressive credit union.
Sarah, would you like to add anything to what Julie said?
Yeah, and just real quick, Catherine, I think there are some really great examples, Bristol Pound and other things, although the Bristol Pound is struggling a little bit right now, and the Berkshire Buck and other things. They're really excellent for tracing circularity of money within a place. And so I think that's the great potential of local monies. They, unless, as Julie said, they are supported by financial institutions like a community bank, they have very limited scope at the moment to really provide scale. And sorry, Sarah, you were going to say something, so I'll just end it there.
No, Catherine and I already had a dialogue on this, so that's fine. I'll leave it at that.
All right, so Amanda, I think it's going to be your turn.
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm in Vermont right now. Matthew Burke is here too, so he might want to add as well. But so Vermont is a rural state in the U.S., and I just feel I've loved, first of all, like this whole discussion. I think a lot of the points around culture, so like the importance of like sort of a culture of trust, I think, of like community, of cooperation, all of those sort of things seemingly are fostered much more easily in rural communities because there's, you know, a lot of a sense of very much depending on one another. And Vermont has a long history of implementing quite strong like land protection legislations and things like this that have minimized the development of large scale industry, or a lot of, I mean, we now have like a couple of Walmarts and things, but it took a very long that ethic here. But I guess my question would be for anyone in this group about the size, because one of the challenges is because you're talking about very small scale, often self-employed or like really small firms that are engaging in this space, that even though we have very high, let's say, local food consumption, like the price of food is high, yeah, and the wages are not. And so everything is more expensive here. It just legitimately is compared to other states, just because there isn't the scale of the production, and we don't have the like very high value added kind of sectors and things like this. So if from experience in other places, if there's an idea of like what size of cooperative or something like this are we talking about when it starts to sort of even out in terms of the pay relative to cost?
There are a lot of really good questions coming in. That was an excellent question, and then there are a lot of really good questions coming in at the chat, Mark. And there was a question on global trade. There's so much to discuss, and of course we have a lot of thinking on that. If people want to look at our website, the Democracy Collaborative, we have a lot of kind of overwhelming amounts of information on this. Also, the Next System project, we're doing work on trade at the moment, specific to the question that was asked. Happy to share, and I hope we'll maybe put my email out and express. But to the last question, I mean, it's an excellent one, and the scale question is real, especially in rural areas. And of course, you know, cooperatives don't always have to be small scale, and in fact, you know, the idea is to redesign sort of industrial planning around alternative models of ownership to this. That's what the evergreen cooperatives are, and you are starting to see them get to scale. The Evergreen Cooperative Laundry in Cleveland just beat out Sodexo for a full laundry contract that doubled both the size of their employees. They were able to convert all of the Sodexo employees to employee owners, doubling their size to over 200 employees, and be able to offer services at a higher scale. And then that's an urban example, but you're also seeing it in different ways in rural examples, but you see it more of sort of a distributed model of interconnected, smaller cooperatives that come together. For example, in Wisconsin, in Viroqua, Wisconsin, there's a multi-stakeholder cooperative called the Fifth Season Cooperative that aggregates produce from multiple small farms around a specific area in Wisconsin, and then provides value added services like canning and freezing and all this kind of stuff, so that those small farms can actually directly service the hospitals throughout that rural region of Wisconsin. So you can see these sort of tiered, maybe not, when we think of scale in a capitalist model, we think of big growth, but you can actually have scale in terms of distribution and distributive growth, and in smaller connected ways. And so there are different ways of thinking about this. And of course, the rural example is an interesting one. We've done some work in Native American reservations. I'd be happy to share some of that with you.
Yeah, just to add one thing in terms of scale, because scale actually needs to be looked at for all of the initiatives that we're promoting. As Julie's highlighted, we're looking at community bank as a possibility, and very much aware that would not be centered purely in a geography like North Ayrshire. It has to have more scale. So it's depending upon what the initiative, understanding where that break-even point is and how best to design it, and then the collaboration is right at the heart of this, and this collaboration doesn't just have to be in the area, it needs to extend beyond the area. So great question, thanks Amanda.
Thank you all. So yes, I'm aware of the time, it's only 4 minutes to 6, but I would like Mark London to go for the last question, and then I'm going to make sure that everybody's going to be connected to either Sarah's or Julie to get answers on this, and I'll do a few reminders at the end, but please, Mark, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I have so many, but the one that I was asking most recently was the idea of the kind of local economy and the fact that because of globalization, everything is so linked. And for me, sometimes we seem to be trying to do the right thing and sneak it in without people realizing that we're changing everything. And for me, the point is to change everything. So I think that I'm really interested in the kind of educational perspective and the fact of how we take on some of these built-in injustices within the economic system and how we can do community wealth building very openly and honestly, which is going to frighten people and it's going to change people. So I'm just interested in your perspective on that and that kind of decolonialization and how we bring things like Black Lives Matter into these conversations right at the heart rather than in the periphery. An easy one, okay? So since we've only got a few minutes.
I have so much to say on that, but I'll let Sarah go first.
No, I was just going to say Julie's the best one. Just to contextualize it in Escher, I think it would be best as a final question. Julie, do you want to just draw from the experience that we've had?
Yeah, that's a really big question mark. I think as Sarah Deas said, this is about a bottom-up system change. So although we have to work in partnership with national governments, we're collaborating with regional partners or work with national agencies, but it's important for the local authority and the local communities to set out what type of place they want. So it's not about chasing funding, it's about setting out, how can we build on what we already have. Our communities have some fantastic ideas around what they want their place to look like, what they want their town centres to look like. I think the role of the local authorities is about enabling them in that, not necessarily doing everything ourselves, but we realise there is a role for municipal projects as well. So for me, it's about bottom-up system change. We are the first local authority in Scotland to do this. We hope that others will follow suit. I guess something that I do worry about though is that the concept of community wealth building just becomes another buzzword and it gets diluted. But for me, community wealth building is a set of actions and principles that you can use to achieve a community well-being economy. It is about being action-oriented, about collaboration, about bottom-up partnerships as well. It's not just a theory or something that sits on a shelf or you use as a buzzword. It's practical. It's doing things differently.
All right.
Thanks very much, Julie. That's a good try.
Thank you. Just to, okay, so we have 1 minute left, and I always try to be fair when it comes to time. With time, I know that we could be talking about this for another hour. Amazing questions in here. I'm just going to save the chat and make sure that the connections for those for answering and continuing the conversations goes on. I would like I'm just going to read Lee's reflection on, I think it's important, or at least it touches me. So she mentioned in here that I worry that community wealth building conversations end up focused on financial tools, monetary policy, etc. very quickly, and this becomes less accessible for involving a broader range of people, including those with less education. How do you build an economic literacy to this community development work? So this is for all of us to keep thinking about this, for all of us to maybe make a second part of this amazing talk and bringing all you back in a second one. Thank you all so much for attending, for participating, for showing up. And so I'm going to be sharing the recording on Slack and on the WEAll Citizens platform. You have the discussion forum on the WEAll Citizens platform, so please continue the conversation. Make sure that you keep connecting with each other, that this is not just the talk, that this is just the beginning, that we keep collaborating and working together. And I'll see you in September. It's going to be a surprise of September, even for myself, but I know we're going to have an amazing WEAll talk in September. And if anybody has an amazing idea or something that you would like to bring to this community, please just write to me. You have all my email, anna@wellbeingeconomy.org. And if any of you wants to connect with Sarah McKinley, Sarah Deas, Julie, more on a more personal, private level, let me know, and I'll make sure those connections are done. If I'm not forgetting anything, I am so grateful for all of you, and thank you for joining us today. Hi, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Boy.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah and
Bye.
Julie.
Everyone.
Great, this was great. Sorry I talked so much, I got too excited.
No, you didn't. That was great. No.
Well, at least you talk sense, Sarah.
Well, I hope so.